Hello, world. Today, I am so excited because we're talking to Josh Knell, the Vice President of Customer Experience at School AI. Josh has such a cool story. He started at 11 years old helping his neighbors fix their computers, worked his way up to be a CTO, and is now an executive at one of the nation's fastest growing AI startups. What I loved about our conversation was even though it was technical and filled with stories about AI and process and running teams, he reminds us that everything starts and ends with people. So let's have Josh take it away. Alrighty, Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start. You've had an absolutely amazing career going from an IC to the upper echelons of management. Can you kind of give us the highlight reel of your career journey so far?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited about this. Hopefully, can help somebody who's in one of those stages. My first place was in technology, or do we want to go everywhere? Is it just technology?
Let's hear the whole thing.
All right. So when I was 11 years old, my dad had a compact Presario, and it broke. It was like a $3,500 computer, and I was playing like Load Runner on it, and it was insanely cool. And it broke. My dad was devastated because it was so much money, and he's like, this is a piece of crap. And I was like so sad, and I remember like crying about it, and he's like, well, I'm gonna just throw it away. And I was like, there's no way we could throw this away. It costs so much money. There's got to be a way to fix it. He's like, I have no idea. And then that sparked my whole freaking career because I wanted to play Load Runner so bad. And so gaming was the catalyst to problem solving, and basically started building computers from there. So I started in hardware, learned about basically just Legos with electronics. And in the late 90s, there was a lot of like pop up computer hardware stores that we don't have anymore today, which is super sad. But you used to be able to go to 3 to 4 different stores where you could buy OEM parts, and you could just go in there and say, I need a modem, or I need a graphics card. And if you had the right motherboard, you could slap it in. And so that was like incredible. It was like Legos that you could play games with. So for me, it was that. And then I started looking around the neighborhood, and I saw everybody was having the same problem. Someone bought like a really nice HP and it broke, and they were like, well, that's it. Got to buy a new one. And so I started offering my services as an 11-year-old, and a lot of people couldn't believe. And for me, I was like laughing to the bank because I would just take some compressed air and just get the dust out, and then it would work. And there was overheating, and people didn't realize what was going on. And so I didn't know there was a thing called like an A+ certification or IT or help desk, or I didn't know any of those words. I just wanted to play computer games and I wanted money. So I did that from like 11 till I was basically out of high school. I did a bunch of odd jobs and worked. My dad's an architect, and so I'd work in the blueprint machine. Get my probably lost 1,700 brain cells doing blueprints because they'd put them through ammonia and put them back through. But what that taught me is like I didn't want to do that. So some fascinating thing here is that people hear architecture and they think they romanticize it, and they're like, oh, building design, and they think of like Frank Lloyd Wright, and they think of like these incredible architects of the past. They think of like skyscrapers. What they don't think of is like the gradiented level of gravel in a parking lot to make sure the rain doesn't flood. And that's like the majority of architecture is like that kind of crap, where it's like, how do you get the building materials correct? There's 17 different brick companies vying for your work, and they're all taking you out to lunch and trying to get you to buy their brick. Like that's architecture. So I remember being so disappointed because I remember being in AutoCAD, and I was doing like 3D lightsabers and P-51 Mustangs and tanks. And I was just like, Dad, look at this cool stuff I made. And he's like, that literally has no value. And I remember being so disappointed, like, who am I? I can't please my dad. I can't do this. I want to be an architect, but I want to make cool stuff. And so I started to realize like, and he was like anti-gaming. He was like, it's a waste of time, and I was like, maybe it is a waste of time. So I started to train to be a pilot. That was my other passion, was aviation. So I went into aviation science as an undergrad and started flying airplanes. This is right after 9/11 happened though. So I had these like senior pilots that were my instructors all saying like, boy, you don't want to be a pilot right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, can't win. So I was like, architecture was a failure. Aviation ended up being a failure. I go to this psychology professor. I'm like, I want to help people. And I was thriving in that class and like always like the first one to raise my hand and loved it. And then one day after class, he was like, Josh, can I talk to you for a second? I was like, yeah. He's like, I can tell you really love this. I was like, I love this. He's like, what's your goal? I'm like, I want to be a clinical psychologist. I want to help people change their lives. He was like, let me give you a scenario. I just want to like run by you first. And I was like, go for it. He's like, what if you were helping these like three incredible people with depression? They're having such a hard time. And then out of nowhere, all three of them commit suicide. And I was like, what? I was like, I felt like a pit in my stomach, even in this fake scenario. And he looked me in the eyes. He's like, that's why I'm a professor. It happened to me. I'm the guy. And I was just like heartbroken. And he was like, could you handle that? And I was like, I couldn't handle it. And he's like, this is the thing, man. He's like, you can't control people. You can only help them. And if you don't understand that, I wish someone had done this to me and like given me this advice early on, because now I'm kind of shook and I'm being a professor because I can't do the practice anymore. I just want you to know like this stuff exists. He's like, I've had this talk with other people and they've gone, that's why I want to get into this, because I want to help those people. He's like, I encourage those people. He's like, I just want you to be aware of it. And I was like, I couldn't do that. And I went home and I remember just crying, like, I can't do anything. I can't do AutoCAD. I can't fly. I can't do psychology. And so I kind of turned back to video games and I was like, what do I love about video games? And it's just, it was because of all the negative connotations around them. But then I started looking at the design and I was like, ooh, maybe I could be a designer. And so then I started using that as a channel and I went into this design class and it was just classic Photoshop. But at the end of the unit, they did this thing called ActionScript in Flash. And everybody sucked at it except me. I was like, this is amazing. I can make things do backflips literally on a canvas. And I understood the concept of motion. I understood the concept of animation digitally. And that was like my big, whoa, what if I could do this moment? And I started going further into ActionScript and realizing it was a thing called programming I didn't even know about. So this whole time I'd been working in the help desk at the university that I was at, and I was just resetting passwords was like basically my life. And I was just like, this is it. This is the pinnacle of like all the computer building I did. And then, professors would come in all huffy and like, I need a password reset now. And I'm like, nah, okay, you're good to go. Like it was just a thankless, horrible job. And I saw these people come through and they're all like kind of happy and talking to each other. And they went into this back room and it was adjacent to us in a different hallway. They were laughing and having a good time. And I'm like, who are they? Because the help desk team was like miserable. And I went and talked to my director. I was like, who goes into that room over there? And they're like, oh, we don't talk to those guys. We could leave them alone. They're the programmers. And I was like, I want to be those guys. So I started looking up what programming was. And I was disheartened because everything felt so intimidating. And none of it was an ActionScript. It was all in Java back then. And I remember being like, welp, this isn't for me. And so then that led to me going back into the digital media program is what they called it, and pursuing Flash. And then I loved playing golf and disc golf. I got into this Flash class, and my professor, his name was Kalen Sharp, and he was like a young entrepreneur that had become super successful through just hard work and effort, and he loved education. So he taught for fun, and then he was a programmer during the day. And I thought that was so cool. And I remember wanting to impress him so much. And so I came to class and he had a project and I made a little physics based disc golf game with like hit test objects. So if you threw a disc, it would hit a wall and it'd give you points, for getting your par score. And then they'd randomly generate trees on the canvas. And so everybody was doing like a ball, like doing like, right? That was the assignment. And that was an A because it was just like digital media survey. And here I was building this physics-based hit test object, random tree generated disc golf game, and I was just like loving it. Didn't feel like homework. It felt like I was playing video games. And so he approached me and he was like, "Dude, what the heck? Like, did you do this?" And I was like, yeah. And this is, pre Wikipedia, pre Stack Overflow, tons of knowledge that was existent. But he was just like, holy crap, how'd you do this? And I was like, I figured this out. I wanted to do this and figure this out. And he was like, would you want to come work for me? And I was like, what? Yes. And so I go work for Sharp Media, which is his company, Kalen Sharp. And the first assignment they gave me was an augmented reality QR code where they had a 3D object that I had to apply so that if you put a QR code up to a screen, the 3D image would pop up. And it was used because back then AR was so new and it was people were trying to figure out how to use it. And so the first people that were trying were marketers. And so they'd put them on business cards. And so you could like watch this and you go up to a camera and put your business card up. And then there'd be like I remember there was a power company that had like a wind turbine that would pop out of it. And people would be like, that's incredible. And they'd be like, whoa, this is in my card. And it was like magic. And so we were doing some of that magic for people. And I felt like a superhuman. I was like, all I'm doing is really taking like XML and JSON objects and applying them to ActionScript, but I just like nobody could understand that. And so I remember coming home and being like, showing it to my friends and family and being like, look what I did. And they're just, this is incredible. You did this. And then finally, my dad was like, well, I guess there is some value in technology. And it was just fun. It was like all of a sudden everything just kind of broke open. And the rest after that was just a series of progressions into different technologies. ActionScript 3 at the time was the technology. And so it went from Flash into a framework called Flex. Not to be confused with current day Flexbox, but it was a full-on ecosystem where we could write an ActionScript and output to iOS, Android, and web. It was insane. But then Steve Jobs had beef with Adobe, and he decided to destroy the Flash player inside of Safari, which took out a whole chunk of the market and kind of started the degradation of the Flash player plugin, which is okay, by the way. I wish, you used to have to go to those websites and it would say, this site requires an Adobe Flash player, and it was just awful web experience, so I'm not sad about that. But I am sad about the other side, the Flex side, where we were building like apps. So that was really hard for me because I had to transition away from what I loved, which was a strongly typed, visualized language like ActionScript. And then there was this nasty language called JavaScript that nobody liked to code in, that had no frameworks. It was awful. And everybody was like, well, because he destroyed the Flash player's future, all of these incredible engineers shifted from AS3 to JavaScript. And I had to do it or get left behind or stay niche. There's a lesson there for sure with all the current day technologies. So that led to me being able to translate. I think that was one of the biggest moments in my career because I had to move from AS3 to JavaScript, and I had to like become an engineer and not like just an AS3 code monkey. So that was like wildly big for me. So if any of you are listening and you're going, I only know this language and I feel like I identify as like, maybe you are a JavaScripter and you're like, I do React or TypeScript or whatever, Vue. You might need to wake up a little bit and try another language as a challenge for yourself to become a quote unquote programmer. Because then what happens is this beautiful thing. A for loop is a for loop is a for loop. So all of a sudden you start to go, oh, I could do Python. Yeah, I could do C#. I could do Java. I could do JavaScript. They're just all in the mother language of C, at least in that instance. But then if you go jump over to a totally different language stack, you still have the same concepts, variables, for loops, functions, classes. And so those things, all of a sudden you start to become a critical thinker that happens to program versus a programmer that tries to critical think. And that's when it's like, I think that's the moment when juniors become seniors. I think there's always this interesting moment when people are like, I'm a junior, I'm a mid-level. I think the difference between a junior and a mid is really just syntax and familiarity. A difference between a mid and a senior is critical thinking patterns, logic. You can have people that have coded or developed for 10 to 15 years, and I would consider them mid or junior because their syntax, they just know how to use boilerplate code they don't understand. how to think and solve problems. And so um, I started to realize these things and translate them to the executive teams in business. And so my career started to transition from doer to translator. So I was translating, oh, well, this is why we're doing this, and this is why it takes 2 weeks long. And they go, oh, thank you. Nobody's ever said that. They just said 2 weeks, and we just couldn't, there was a black box. So that led to an incredible growth in my career where I was like, why are my peers not talking to the business team? And I would talk to my peers, and they go, they just don't understand, and they would just put themselves in a box themselves and go, they don't know what they're doing. They're dumb. And so it's kind of crazy because a lot of my senior engineer friends, they don't feel people are dumb anymore. They've matured, but they do feel that it's not worth explaining complex things simply, and it's not worth their time. And so now you start to get this interesting dichotomy between an individual contributor and a manager. And then an entrepreneur is a whole other ballgame of those. So I started to pursue, I didn't know it, manager work, because I was the one that could translate. And so I was like the master translator, and then that led to VP of Eng, Director of Engineering, ultimately culminating in the highest title you can have as a technologist, I think, as a CTO outside of an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is like tops, but CTO is pinnacle where you now have to work with hardware, software, and thank goodness I did a ton of hardware background in my 11-year-old to 18-year-old plus time frame, because you have to make decisions on servers and input-output operations and cloud technologies that are still hardware that we just call cloud. But the idea is, like, if you understand these concepts, now they make sense. So if you are a listening person aspiring to be a CTO, I have bad news for you. You can't just be really good at front end or back end or full stack. You have to understand beyond that into the hardware to make good informed decisions or hire people that are smarter than you. And so that was the culmination of my technology career. And then I found myself really excited about education. And so I started to go back to the same university that I graduated in. And I wanted to give back by being like a night professor, like an adjunct professor. So I went and talked to them. They're like, well, you have to be working on your master's degree, or you have to have a master's degree to be able to do this right now. And so I was like, great. So I started working on a master's degree in educational technology and instructional design. And that was enough to get me started. As long as I was working on it, it was sanctioned. So I started teaching JavaScript to young, not that younger than me, minds, but I was just really excited about it and brought my passion to that. And then my translation skills went even higher, because now you have these people that are super excited and they're like, how does this work? Why did you put this here? And then you have to explain yourself. Here's another major lesson. If you can explain what you're doing to, a 12th grader or a 5th grader, you are well on your path to management if that's what you want. Or you can be a deeper IC, individual contributor, because now people don't have to guess what you're saying. I think it was like Robert Feynman. I talked about the Feynman technique, but it's like, can you explain a concept to a child? And if you can, then you've really like understood it. That's not the direct quote. I'm just saying that's the concept of the Feynman technique is, can you teach somebody else something and get smarter from it? So that really defines my career as that. It's Richard, not Robert. My gosh, Richard Feynman. And so I found that to be fascinating. And then I moved into a full-on education role. So I started being a full-time JavaScript instructor instead of just at night. And then inevitably over time, I always just kind of gravitate towards leadership. So I then went to, I was in this big boot camp called Lambda School, which then rebranded to Bloom Tech. And I started as a web instructor, and then all of a sudden I was leading the web team. Then pretty soon I was leading the education team, the curriculum team, and then I was leading the engineering, product, and education team by the end. It was about a 7-year sojourn there. And then I was like, all right, I want to do my own thing. And then I started getting into AI because AI was finally a thing beyond, all the hardcore AI people are going to be like, it's always been around through machine learning. in data science. And I'm like, yes, it has. It hasn't been accessible though until basically the GPTs and the LLMs of the world started to show up. And then that's when it became like mainstream. And so just like that shift from AS3 to JavaScript had a hard shift into the language of LLMs, which is prompting first, and then getting into like now I'm limited by my prompts. Where do I go next? And then you're basically APIing, application programming interfacing, into other tools. And then the language of AI at the time was Python. And so now you have to start looking at the Python ecosystem. So that's what I did. And then I started a business called MindBit. And what we wanted to do was upskill jaded software engineers that were sick of the hamster wheel of technology. And they just wanted to know, what do I need to do to say confidently, yes, I am an AI engineer, or I can engineer things using AI problem solving techniques. And it was a combination of LLMs, Python, understanding the ecosystem, tooling, and then giving people challenges to go solve on their own. We kicked off a really good cohort. Nick was in our cohort actually, and he had a lot of value from it in terms of like going back to work and solving problems. And then we were like ready to kick off several other cohorts. And then I had this crazy opportunity come my way from a company called School AI. And they were looking for basically leadership to come into their team. And so I'm currently at School AI. And the fascinating thing is, I'm not directly in a technology role for the first time in a long time. I'm heading up the customer experience team. So I have customer success support, but I have education and community and training, which is great. So the fun thing is I'm a super technology enabled leader in a space that is usually not supercharged by technology. It's usually just people and operations. So I find myself at a huge advantage in that when we go have lunch at work, I can sit down with the engineers and we can talk shop, and then I can go back to my team, translate across the team to help them understand like where we're coming with product and where we're going next, and using those same techniques, the Feynman technique and teaching. And so that brings us to current day. And so I'm in this weird, interesting spot where in technology, a for loop is a for loop. Well, guess what? In leadership, having goals, building teams, being empathetic, being a listener, but also holding the line, they're the same transferable skills between customer success, marketing, sales, or engineering. And so if you're also listening to this going, I don't know if I want to make this big leap out of technology into this new space or vice versa. The cool thing is once you achieve a certain level of critical thinking, it doesn't matter where you go as long as you're genuine and your goal is to like help solve people problems. So there you go. That's a lot. Jeez.
It was amazing. Thank you so much for walking us through the whole journey. I think one thing that really resonated with me was that translator idea, right? And that idea of like, I speak the language of technology and I can take this big bucket of, process and people and problems and make that happen through technology. And we can action this and we can work with it. Clearly you've got a deep well of like technical literacy to draw on to make that translation possible. What about the people who like don't have that foundation, right? Like where can they start, or where would you sort of point them to kind of like begin that journey to becoming a translator?
You can't force it. So that's one of the hard things is that I tried to force myself to be an iOS developer once, because I just loved the Mac ecosystem and I was just so excited about Swift when it came out. And I got I signed up for all the courses and got the big books and started coding and built my like Hello World app with my emulator, and then I put it on my app on my phone. And it was like so visceral because like I coded something and then I held it in my hand. It was so powerful. And then I was just like, gosh, I don't have time to keep doing this. But now at least I have enough to say that like, yeah, I developed an app for myself. So What that did though is it helped my BS meter, we'll call it, go way up. So if somebody inside of my organization was like, if we just had this one tool, it'd solve all of our problems. Anybody that works in any of these spaces will, laugh at that because they're going to go, there is no such thing as that magical tool. But as a technological enabled or technically illiterate manager, by having just that much more information, you are now way more equipped for decision making. So then the answer would be, what's something that you've always wanted to try and make it fun? So let's say you're currently, you would define yourself as technology illiterate right now. Well, maybe AI is something that you want to become literate in. Then I would recommend that's where you go. Or maybe you do want to go see if you could build an app. Why not you? Go try it out. Go build the simplest app. It doesn't mean you're going to become an app developer or an AI engineer. And that's the bridge. It's like, go try one dumb thing that is exciting to you. Some people might be video games. Go build a simple video game. Or maybe it's a website, informational website about something that you've done. Challenge yourself with something that scares you slightly more than you're currently doing outside of your comfort zone. And that's the magic. So I think everybody knows this, but if you were quote unquote illiterate and trying to become more literate, there is no better way to learn than to do something you're more passionate about, even if it's unrelated to your work.
Absolutely. Very, I think we've talked about this for a long time, but that I'm so aligned there where you got to just pick something you're interested in, pick something you love, and it's amazing what will flow from
Yeah.
there as you get into it. I want to focus a little bit more on your current role, right, where you're not on the technology side of the house, right? And so you've been a developer, you've led developers, you've collaborated with developers. What are your like must dos for like effective developer collaboration and interfacing with those teams?
Listening. Um, if you listen, if you seek to understand before seek to be understood, that's huge because um, I'll come into a new office space. And one of the hardest things as a new leader is oftentimes you're replacing and or getting new reports and you're instantly the scary new guy. Doesn't matter, if you're coming into leadership, they're just like, is this guy going to fire me? Is he going to lay me off? And then the technology team's like, oh, great. Is this person technology illiterate? Am I going to have to use small words instead of big words? And so what you do is you go on a listening tour. And so I literally would go and talk to the engineers. And in my mind, I would take a tally of like who I talked to. But I would also just open up my notes app on my phone or a Google Doc, and I would take a couple critical notes about the people I talked to. So let's say I talked to a person named Jill, and in talking to Jill, I find out that she has a burning desire to make video games, but her day job is, operations. And so it's like, wow. So I make those notes. And so over time, that listening tour, people start to really genuinely trust you. And it's not a manipulation tactic. I genuinely want to know about these people. Like, it becomes fun. It becomes a game. And so pretty soon after a month or two, now they're over communicating with you because they trust you. And I trust them. But it all starts with, tell me where you went to high school. How did you get here? Tell me about the last 5 years of your career. What brought you here? And you just see their eyes light up. And people love to talk about themselves, and they will give you so much information to help you get better. So that's what I would do. It's actually has nothing to do with like technology. It has everything to do with people. And then the technology side will reveal itself as you need information. So like, do I really care about the API calls that they're making to OpenAI's model? No, I don't really care. But the reality is that as I get to know them, if I needed to ask that for like a customer success question or something, I know who the person is because I did my homework for the past 3 months. So it's a long play. But if you think about 3 months in the span of a year is nothing. Because our team is about 70 people right now. And it was about 40 when I joined. And it's only been 3 months. So it's just crazy how much growth we've seen. And so I've made an effort to go through and talk to every single person and get to know them. At least not like past the superficial level. Get a couple like pieces. And then you have to be deliberate about this. And sometimes I've had to set up 30 minutes with people that just don't go to lunch or they just don't show up. And I'm going, hey, we've never talked. Can I grab 30 on your calendar? And they're like shocked. They're like, why would you, who's not an engineer, want to talk to me? And I'm going, I just want to get to know you. And it's disarming. And then I literally have an agenda in my mind. So I have this thing called the Book of Knowledge, and it's just mine. And so what I do is I have a notes, and it's just concepts that I have learned through hard knocks or other people have taught me. But I've found that as I've gotten older and repeat processes, sometimes I'm going, man, if I could just remember what I did 3 years ago, that would be great. And so it's not a journal, it's more of a self documentation on like the software development kit of my mind. So it's like I'm built an SDK doc for me, and I'm going, I know I do better when da 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 da. So for an example of that is like one-on-ones. A lot of managers will inherit a team or they build a team and they reinvent the wheel every time. And it's like, why? You've learned so many hard things. Why are you not writing down the things that uniquely are good for you? So for me, I have a process. I just ran through it. I just did it here. We use Trello for the team that I'm on. And I just came from Asana, and before that Jira. It's like the complexity's gotten less and less, surprisingly. And so I've taken the same concepts that I've used in those systems and brought them into Trello. And you can make any project management tool, even just a simple task checklist, you can make it into a system. And so, for example, with my one-on-ones, I'll do wins, blockers, discussion items, PTO, personal time off. And then what I try to do, and I genuinely try to do this, is we do quarterly reviews. And the quarterly reviews roll up to a yearly review. And the yearly review rolls up to the resume. And so what I do genuinely is I sit down with them, I get to know them, I look them in the eye and I say, I want your resume to have incredible quantitative and qualitative bullet points by the time I'm done being your manager. So that you can look at your resume and go, that was awesome. That was a great time. I grew qualitatively and quantitatively. And so what we do is we track wins every 2 weeks. And then I help them identify the qualitative and quantitative wins that are quarter worthy. And then every 3 months we sit down together, we do a retro and say, okay, what's like 1 or 2 things on this list that you're just like super proud of? That rolls into the yearly. And then at the yearly review, we go, let's update the LinkedIn profile. And so it's so crazy. The people I work with are like super accomplished. I'll go look at their LinkedIn profile and it looks like they've done nothing. And I'm going, and then they're like, LinkedIn is so cringe. And I'm like, it is until you need a job. And so what you can do is start storytelling, because we are tribal. And so my big kick lately has been developing stories. And so it's like, how do we make a story out of what you're doing? So if you were to go to like my LinkedIn profile today, I haven't accomplished a lot because I just started in January. So, but I do have stories. In the interview process, I told my kids, hey, I'm interviewing at School AI. Have you heard of it? And they're like, we're using it right now, Dad. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And so I put that on my LinkedIn. And I quoted my son. I said, oh my gosh, Dad, I use School AI at home. And that was so shocking. I've never worked on a product that my children have used. And then we went to parent-teacher conference. And we talked to my son's English teacher. And I had a keen interest because I knew you use School AI. I was like, hey, are you using School AI for anything? And she was like, it saved me 10 hours a week building lesson plans. And I was like, awesome. And so then I take that and I quote that. I don't quote her directly. I say my son's junior high teacher. So if you go to the profile, now I've got stories of qualitative impact. And then as time goes on, I will naturally build quantitative by hitting goals and executing. So for example, we just onboarded about 40 employees over the past 3 months. And so I'm going to be able to quantitatively capture that. And now I've got some story, and I've got something that people can read and are excited about. So that, I don't know, if that was helpful. But that's the concept: is you genuinely get to know people and try to buoy them up.
I I love that. I remember my first like developer job, and the developers were we were literally in the basement of the building, and like people were afraid to come talk to us. And there was a moment where I was working on this project for this division, and we had just like it was like a Friday afternoon, and I closed like 20 of their like years long tickets that had been like in our backlog forever, and they like called me up and we had like a little party. But like because they were so excited that a developer, one of these robots, like actually like paid attention to them, and that we had built a rapport because I had been working with them over the last couple of months. And I always think that's so powerful, right? Like yes, programmers are typically like they're good at what they do, and they can come off as a little isolated, but if you can break down those barriers and get to know them as people, it's amazing what opens up for you.
You're exactly right. My uncle, I have an uncle that has been a CTO or a CIO for the past 25 years of his life, and before that, he was engineering. Went through NASA as an engineer. He went to Marriott, like the hotel chain. He was I think, CTO there. And I was like, "Give me the wisdom, Uncle. You're incredible." And he sat there for a second. He was like, "The longer I'm in the technology game, the more I realize it's a people game." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I have seen so much technology shift from COBOL to TypeScript. There's millions of tendrils in that path." And he's just going, "But nothing has changed more than being kind, seeking for understanding. And, you know, obviously it's not to be a pushover. Empathy can be ruinous if you don't have standards. And so that's a big gotcha, is you have to be able to hold the line with quantitative measures. That's why you have like key performance indicators and objectives and known results and all that good stuff. Um, but people are the number one thing. And that's why technology is so tricky, because sometimes people see AI specifically and they go, it's trying to eliminate people, it's trying to eliminate jobs. And you see all these posts that are like, I wanted AI to do dishes, not art. And I'm like, I hear it loud and clear, but it makes me laugh because the reality is they're missing the point, is that AI allows humans to be more human because it's taking a lot of the computer stuff away. So I have a growth mindset on AI. A lot of people have a scarcity mindset on AI right now because it is scary and it feels like it's taking things away. But our children, our children's children, will not know how to function without it because it'll be just as important as electricity over time. So yeah, I'm excited about AI. It's cool.
I you see that conversation sort of evolving, I think, in the socials and in the tech bubbles that we're in. Is there anything keeping you up at night about AI, or is it like is it all positive? Is it all just an adjustment period and it's going to be great?
I think everybody's got a little bit of that, Skynet fear, where it's like the robots will take over and they'll have the nuclear launch codes and they'll push the buttons because they deem us unworthy of the earth. Like all the sci-fi stuff usually becomes reality over time. So that's a fear. I don't like lose sleep over it. Um, I do lose sleep over the fear mongering on social media. And so I found that like if I delve too deeply, the AI algorithm, keeps feeding me darker holes. And so the hard thing is if I doom scroll at night, I sleep worse. I wake up and guess what? The sun's still shining and the birds are still chirping. And you go down and you get like a coffee or something, or you get, a breakfast sandwich or something. And everybody's just striving to like stay alive. And it's just like grounding. But if you isolate yourself and you look at social media, and then all it's doing is trying to give you more awful, because they're just trying to keep your eyes on the app so you can buy things. That's all it's for. We all know this. We know this, and yet we continue to go down this path. So, I would say the biggest thing I've done to stop myself from losing sleep is to get off social media completely and or visit it intentionally. Unintentional visiting, like when you're bored, will just lead you to so much pain. I'd much rather people like brain rot on TV or video games or something like that, like a hobby, not brain rot there, but I love video games. So, but the reality is like that is a more productive use of your time than doom scrolling on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. LinkedIn is also another place you can lose your mind. I intentionally go to LinkedIn to try to buoy people up, congratulate them, say something positive, and then leave, because there's so much negative that's trying to seep into our minds. And it's usually through news outlets, because why? They want you to buy their subscription. It's so obvious. So um, you got to be really stoic about it and be like, I'm going here with intent. So yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's something everybody's felt this day and age, the social media doom and gloom. Um, with AI a little bit more, y'all are in a really interesting spot where you're building a tool that's like shaping education and like really empowering like teachers to save home so much time. Um, are
Yeah.
you at the same time you're building a company, right? You're a startup. You're onboarding 30 people in a month here, right? Um, how are you like
Yeah.
looking at AI as on the consumer side, where you're this is the product experience versus this is a tool that we're using internally to supercharge all the work that we're doing?
Yeah. Great question. On the consumer side and like how we're thinking about it, we have to listen to consumer. The problem is we have three different types of consumers. We have administrators that need to get data and make hard decisions, um, and justify costs. Then we have teachers who have no time already. They're already worked to the bone, and then they got to like figure out how to do more work. And then putting another tool in their tool set feels just like overwhelming, cup overflowing kind of feeling. And then you get students that are already becoming jaded to AI. Um, my 14-year-old son, he'll be like, I use School AI today or any AI tool. And I'm like, how was it? And he's like, oh, we had a conversation with like George Washington, which was pretty cool. And I'm like, oh, tell me about that. And he'll be like, it's just AI. And I'm like, what? It's just AI? Like this didn't exist 3 years ago for you. What are you talking about? So they've already become, it's just like now it's another tool. And so that is what I'm talking about. It's like, that's the crazy thing. So that's the consumer side. For us, we have to think about the rails. We'll have students that will try to break. There's this concept called drifting, where you slowly wear down the AI by asking it the same question with slightly variations over like 25 messages. And so we'll see students try to drift it into saying inappropriate things, and it's crazy because they're just doing it for fun, but they're hacking. And so we'll see it, and we're like, it's kind of cool that they're hacking, but then like an administrator would be horrified about like what they're saying, right? And so we see that the back end of these things, it's all anonymized data. We don't have like personal information on these students, but and they choose ridiculous names that I won't say on here, but the ridiculous names and then the concepts they're saying are just, it's just fascinating to see. Like that's the dark side. And so we are constantly trying to like curtail and bring it back. And that's the difference between like an open LLM like Claude or ChatGPT or something like that, a tool, um, where it's just like you can get it to say whatever you want within bounds. With School AI, one of our consumer problems is security and visibility. And then there's some districts that don't want to know anything about their students in terms of like their emotions, because it's a liability. So they'll be like, we don't want to know if our student's having a hard time. We just want them to learn, and that's only our job because of legislation and lawyers and stuff. And then there's some places that are like, we want to know everything about our students so we can help support them. And yet we have a product that goes to both of these people, which is crazy. So we've had students, we do these things called exit tickets. And so at the end of like, maybe it's a Friday, and the English literature teacher is like, okay, everybody, what are you gonna do this weekend? Are anybody reading any good books? We're gonna open up this space, and it's gonna ask you some questions and have a conversation with you for the past 15 minutes, and then the bell will ring, we'll be done. That's an exit ticket. So we've had a student go through, many students will go through and they'll write things. Occasionally, like we're talking 1% here, we'll get a student that will say something like, I don't want to go home because I don't want to be hit anymore. Or I don't want to go home because my parents will yell at me. Or I don't want to go home because my brother will hit me. And so those things will come up as alerts for self-harm or violence or stuff like that for instructors or teachers to see. And there have been instances where people have said, I don't want to live anymore, or I don't want to be hurt anymore. And so that'll lead to, internal school counseling, which is helpful for the students because they don't think anybody cares about them. And yet an AI does, because it's trying to guess the next thing to help that person, an LLM. So you get this infinitely patient therapist that is also a school teacher, that is also a friend. And so you never get the like silent kid in the class anymore, because you get the overly social person that always wants to like raise their hand and say me, 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 me. And then you get someone that will never raise their hand. And so both of them are equal and their brains are unleashed because they're having this conversation with this AI bot. Now, I'm using AI very loosely. We all know that there's varying level degrees of AI. So we'll say LLM level. Guessing the next word level is still really powerful for emotions and people. So those are the kinds of problems we're dealing with. And then on the other side of what you asked, how are we using AI internally to get our work done? Unrelated to the product, but like just how we do our work. If we're not using AI, we're not doing it well. For example, we'll have a job description for a new role, and then we use this program called Ask Elephant, and it'll record our voice conversations, and then it'll give us a synopsis of what we talked about. So what we'll do is someone will say, "Hey, do you got Ask Elephant on? Let's have this conversation." And then we'll sit down and we'll say, what are the things that we want in this role for like this new job position? And then we can just brainstorm together as humans. There it is again, the human element. And we don't have to worry about putting notes down anymore. We don't have to like do anything. And so then at the end of the Ask Elephant session, we get a transcript with everything broken down. We then take that and we put it into Claude or ChatGPT, and then we refine it further. And then we bring it to the humans, the hiring manager, and then they review it and go, actually, I think we're missing on this point. What about this? This percent seems too high. You didn't think about this bullet point. And so after a human in the loop is what we call that in AI, we then run it again and we make it more succinct and we get rid of some language, and then we polish it up and then we post it on the job board. So that's a one-to-one example of how we would use AI on a daily basis. And I literally just went through that process like yesterday. So it's just fresh in my mind, but there's many more like that.
Wow, it is such powerful examples, and so thank you so much for sharing with us. The interesting thing, I think, when you're talking about that human in loop concept, there's so much like worry about AI slop these days, but from what I've seen, that's mostly when you're just like go AI, or you're just letting it go with no filtering, no editing, no human, and doing anything in that process.
Yeah.
Do y'all like as a leader, as somebody who's like kind of setting up the processes for your team and other teams, maybe, like how close attention are you paying to that? Like, we need somebody in this loop here to make sure that this output is productive for us, or are we getting to a place now where we are more and more comfortable letting the AI kind of do its own thing?
It depends on the task. For a job description, we're very comfortable because we can quickly course correct. If like a hallucination comes in and one of the bullet points says they need to be able to ride a horse, and it's like, how the heck did that get in here, right? We just delete it and we don't think twice about it. It's never happened, but that's an extreme example. The thing that's less extreme and more cumbersome and hard is like on my support team, we use tools, and we use a concept in AI called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. And what that does is basically we have words that we jam into a document. And those words are like sexually explicit words for support. So if we get a bunch of freaking kids that come in, they make fake teacher accounts, and then they say like boobs, and they think it's hilarious. And the problem is that takes time away from our customer support team. And so we're getting about 850 tickets a week. 60% of those tickets are students saying Skibbity Ohio, or they're just trying to get somebody to get a reaction. They think it's funny. And I don't blame them. I was a kid at one point, and I still have kid tendencies and, the anti-authoritarian stuff. And so they'll see a chat or they'll see a ticket and they'll think, I wonder if anybody's even paying attention. And so then we have an AI bot that responds. It's our first line responder. But instead of it being going and hitting like OpenAI's LLM and it's the full internet response every time, what we actually do is we train it on our RAG, on our context documents. And so those context documents allow us to specifically find and use different words for our product. So maybe out of the 800, only 200 of them are actually like legitimately problems. Well, what we can do is flag those problems so that the human responds. So we can actually, and we do that. And so we have been able to maintain an extremely small support team because AI is filtering all of the crap, and it's at a minuscule cost in terms of human time. And we've had, our time to first response is extremely low for how small our team is. And it just feels awesome because you get to talk to a human and you're not like, you don't have to go through like the telephone tree on a phone call and like, you just want to kill yourself. You're like, I'm sick of this 18 messages in the DMV and I still haven't talked to a human or something like that. It just happened to me the other day. But for us, it's like pretty quick because we have these context documents that are constantly flagging.
Gotcha. Love that. Well, as we're kind of coming to our close here, is there any advice you have for people who are not so technically literate, right? They're coming into either they're entering the workforce or they just don't have a background in technology. What do you say to them, or how can you? What advice would you give to them to think about these things and level up their careers the way you have?
I'd say welcome. It's not too late. That was something that I found a lot when I was running boot camps and when I was a professor. I would have people that were 30 years my senior, and they were almost ashamed. They were like, oh, I can't believe it's taking me this long to finally bite the bullet. And I would celebrate those people and be like, this is incredible. Bring all of your experiences with you. So the water's warm. Jump in. It's not too late. And you'd be shocked how much you can learn. And then what happens is you get all these people that are quote unquote technologists, and then they get behind the times because they get lazy. So they learned their technology once, and now they have no idea how AI works because they're tired and they already put in their licks, and now they become Luddites. So here's the interesting thing. If you're just joining, you now have the opportunity to be the most on the edge niche person because other people are just lazy. It's just human nature. I'm lazy. So I'm not going to go study the things that you would go study. And then now you could be doing the one teaching me. And now I'm going to be the one going, I really should learn that. It's so fascinating how that works. So that's the beauty of technology, is the latest, greatest is going to supersede so much of 20 years of technology background. So let's go. Let's go learn some stuff.
Love that. Love that message. Is there anything you want us, to everyone tuning in, to check out? Either something you've seen recently or something you want to share?
It just depends on, I would say, like learning how to meditate. Learning how to like chill out and disconnect is what I would actually want. I'm in a phase in my life now where I was riding my motorcycle and I was looking at the buildings around me, and each of the buildings is a business that I was driving around, just simple businesses. And I was like, every one of these people have worried, nervous people at the top or the middle or at the front desk of these buildings. And I don't give a rip about the problems that they're dealing with. I'm just cruising by on my bike, right? And then I thought, there's that same thing's happening on while I'm in my office slaving away on my problems, thinking, oh my gosh, the world's going to end. The world's not going to end. There are no emergencies for the majority of people's jobs. There are no emergencies in educational technology. There are emergencies in the emergency field. And so if you're in that field, bless you and thank you. But the reality is like for the majority of us, it's not the end of the world if the bank account numbers go down or up. It's all about perspective. So I would just invite you to chill out, go find something on meditation, get some perspective. It's not the end of the world if you don't get that promotion. It's not the end of the world if you don't learn that technology. It's still going to be there tomorrow. So that's my Zen moment for the day.
We could all use a little more Zen. So, Josh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been super super fun.
Awesome. Hopefully it helps somebody get through anything they're going through. And thanks for having me on.